Welcome, everybody, to the February 20th, 2025 edition of the Technical Advisory Council of the Confidential Computing Consortium. We are an open and collaborative community. Everybody is welcome to participate in the discussion today and to contribute constructively, whether it's at this meeting or through GitHub issues or within any of our projects. We abide by the antitrust policy of the Linux Foundation. You can read more about that at linuxfoundation.org/antitrust-policy. I think we have a relatively quick agenda for today. We've got some announcements to go through, and within that, we'll hit that governing board agenda item that is also listed under new business. Mark was just saying pretty quick update on the workload identity. And we have to revisit where we are with what we used to call project mentors and we now call project liaisons. And then we have a demo that got shortcut due to a fire drill. So looks like we have Jacob on the call, so look forward to getting that in full force today. Any other agenda items I've missed? Okay, we do not have a vote today, so I'm going to kind of skip over roll call, but I've kind of skimmed and it looks like we've got pretty good attendance from voting members. This is the part of the call where if you have not had a chance to introduce yourself in the community, you are welcome to pop off of mute and do so. Looking at who we have, and all those names look familiar. So I think we can scoot right along here. Last time, let's see here. I started to modify this inadvertently. It's a new topic for today. Last time we talked about workload identity, and we had a full tech talk from Jens and the partial talk from Jacob. And I may have inadvertently deleted something out of here that we talked about last time. But let's get into the newer material. So we reached the end of Sal's contract. So Sal was our technical community architect for 2024, and we are exploring new candidates for 2025. And we've selected one of those candidates, and we're going through the last dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and we should be able to introduce that new individual to the community by our next session. And maybe even before then on the mail list. So for those of you who had been working with Sal on a topic, Sal is no longer funded by the consortium. And so we can work with Rian or Renu in the interim here, but we'll have the new TCA on board pretty quick. One of the things that we're going to be doing with the new TCA is we selected somebody with different skill sets. So we're going to continue experimenting with this role. So we find something that works well for the consortium. The next thing, so last time we were going to check in on the kernel SIG. As we went from 2024 to 2025, the meeting series got a little bit out of whack. And I think that's been corrected. Catherine, can you confirm for me that we've got a working series now?
Yeah, I think I followed up with Steve from Google, and I believe we have a new schedule set up. I believe it's monthly for now. I think the Asia meeting series does not have good attendance, I think. So so we're focusing on the monthly. I think kind of meeting series for now.
Okay, yeah, that's my recollection from the thread with the other people who helped chair that meeting. And we also moved the European friendly time, which was not so friendly in Europe. It was evening on Friday nights. So we've moved that to Thursday. Is that right, Catherine?
Oh, I have to double check. I don't remember.
Okay. That's what I recall Steve suggesting. So I'll let you check on that in the background. And then I promised you and I would have a one-on-one to get up to speed on different TAC responsibilities. We didn't get that scheduled, but just as far as kind of doing that live real time here. If you can help manage the kernel sig, and maybe it's Steve that's actually doing that, but we can proxy that through you. Then I know we've got somebody on the TAC that's keeping apprised of the kernel sig. Does that work for you?
Yes, it sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk offline. Yeah.
Okay. Next thing is the job board went up last time, but we did not have any jobs to put on the job board, so it was kind of up in name only. But I think Yash got a couple jobs listed on there that are available in Bangalore through Red Hat. So that's pretty cool. So if your companies are looking for people, that's a place that we have to help advertise to get your staffing. See,
And
is there
not
anything
just
from the-
companies. If you're an academic or research institution or anything like that, we are of course very happy to be putting jobs and internships or anything else like that up on that board as well. I think so.
Yeah,
please.
Okay. Next thing is we've got a board meeting coming up next week. We're trying to get a little bit more disciplined about getting material available for that meeting beforehand. And so what I normally do is reflect whatever we've been focused on for the last month at the TAC. The topics that I plan to talk about with the board are this update on the TCA role, introduce the workload identity efforts that are underway. We also have a GDPR document that was discussed with the board last time. That work kind of sits astride the TAC and outreach and GRC SIG. So we've just been taking it directly to the board, asking them for to find appropriate reviewers within their companies. And then we may or may not talk about this project liaisons topic that we'll talk about in a little bit here. If there's something that you think is important for the board to know that we work on in the TAC, feel free to send me a note or just bring it up here. All right, and then the last thing on the announcements, this is a repeat from last time, but it's a good segue to the to the project liaisons topic. So we've got one of the recurring things that we have a responsibility for is checking in with the projects annually, and Renew is trying to get those scheduled. I think maybe a more direct way to do that, Renew, might just be to go ahead and just assign them times rather than ask for which of several dates they might be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I'll assume you haven't heard any new updates on that front in the last week since we spoke.
No, so Then about the annual project updates, yeah, I completely agree because some of the dates we have already skipped because I did not receive any of the response for the Q1 nominations. So I have updated on the email saying about the latest dates which we have, and I have tried to accommodate some of the dates from Q2 as well, which have not been nominated by any of the other projects. So definitely, if I do not hear anything by tomorrow, I shall be going ahead and marking one particular date on a random basis for a particular project to present their annual status. So yeah.
Okay. Um, so we've got a mix of people on the TAC now who have been around for a while, other people still relatively new. One of our responsibilities had been to make sure that for each project, we had somebody on the TAC who was acting as a mentor to the project. That term got a bit conflated with a mentoring program that we have to bring new people into the community. And so we renamed them to be project liaisons. And this concept of, hey, we have to have an annual update. One of those touch points with the project to know who's an active maintainer and try to get some of the logistics worked out for scheduling. That's one of the little responsibilities of each of us on the TAC for which project we're helping support. But we've grown the number of projects, and some of the names that we've had here have been grown stale. And so this was evident to us about a year ago, and so we created this issue to talk about how we wanted to manage this responsibility going forward. And it's basically keep going as we're going, completely stop doing this, or see if there's a more scalable mechanism where each of us has like a subject matter that we are responsible for or that we offer to the projects. I think it might also be worth just kind of going through to do a quick scrub here of who we have and where the gaps are. So it looks like we don't have anybody assigned right now for the certifier framework. Let's see if we have Alec on. I can't remember if he said he had a conflict today or not, but he had previously volunteered for Coconut. Nick in the past had supported NARCs. I'm not sure if he's still doing that. He's generally not joining our meetings anymore, though. Eric Voigt also tends not to join these meetings. Boktuk is, of course, pretty current. Lily has moved on to other tasks. Yash, I don't know if you picked up this from her or not. Certainly not in
I
contact.
haven't actually, because I volunteered for the VertiE project.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just clear Lily out now, and Eric and Nick, so we can start to see where we have some gaps. Dale should be current with Manatee. I have not checked in with Oakland or Tate in a while. I don't know if this is current or not. Mark's doing double duty here with OE. Fritz is not on. Fritz said that he had a conflict today, but he was active in Slack beforehand, expressing some thoughts about this. But he's currently signed up with SPDM. Thomas on Veracruz, Howard on Verizon, and Yash, you were just mentioning VertiE. Any other additions or changes on this list? So we've got about 4 projects needing assistance, maybe 5. And then we also have these SIGs. So Catherine, this is what we were just kind of referring to a little bit earlier. I have been generally helping the attestation SIG along, though I haven't been able to attend that as frequently lately. And Mark just sits astride both meetings. So those are managed in a similar way. So maybe what we could do now is have just some free-form discussion about what direction we want to go as a TAC with this idea of having mentors.
So I
It
think
was-
sorry.
Yeah, I set it up like I was opening up discussion, but just a couple quick prefacing remarks. This was originally to make sure that we had it as an open source organization that we are. Want to make sure that we have connection between the governance and the projects. And so that's something that we would risk if we don't continue doing this. One of the things we're supposed to do is help the projects progress, so kind of move up our maturity life cycle. Recently, this topic of sanctions came out where the projects might not be aware of it. It is a governance issue. It's something that should be like a pass down to the project so that they're aware of it. And also the scheduling, this sort of logistical matter with the scheduling of reviews. And now let's have some open discussion about whether and to what degree we want to continue offering this capability to the projects.
Yeah, so could maybe go back to that the picture of the ones which are missing. That would be, yeah. So yeah, there are one thing I think would be useful to have an idea of is how active these projects are. You know, what number of pull requests and stuff there are on each of them, because that might give us some clues as to how much, you know, attention we want to spend. So for instance, I know that NARCS is very quiet at the moment, but from time to time I hear people saying they'd like maybe to take it up. Maybe that'd be easier if we had someone who was kind of owning it. And I don't know. The other thing which I think we need to be thinking of is in the not too distant future, we're going to need to think about the Cyber Resilience Act in EU and stewards and stuff. And there'll be things we need to talk about in the future about that. But having a project liaison will help us have some of those discussions when that comes up in 6, 12 months, whatever. So I wouldn't want to, you know, lose the concept completely, because I think there may be some useful things to be going on there. So that was kind of it, really.
Mike? Other thoughts from TAC members in particular, or if you are on a project, love to get feedback from the projects. In the past, we've asked projects, do you want this? And I remember Coconut, you're mentioning that was one of the things he had seen when he brought Coconut to the CCC was this is a service that we offer from the TAC. So he wasn't quite sure what he wanted from the mentor, but he liked the idea of having. Maybe to stimulate a little bit more conversation. If we'll probably go through the process of just assigning people to projects. We'll give a first run to let people pick the project that they're interested in, but then we'll have to just go through and assign people after that. Paul?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to ask whether there's a clear definition of what the liaison role actually is, right? I mean, you hinted that it's changed its name from mentor in order to avoid terminology clash. But what is the role? What's the commitment? Is there like a written specification of what these people do, and do they need deep expertise on the project, or is it more of a kind of just an admin sort of bridging communication? Oh, right, okay, you have a write-up, that's good.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. What is it that we're actually requiring of ourselves in this role? Drop this link in the chat. It's a little bit more probably on the logistical side than the technical depth side, but I think it's really always up to the strengths of the individual and their affinity for the project. One of the original things was a growth plan, and we have since simplified the project progression plan, where we used to have, I think, 4 stages, and now we only have 3. Because it had probably been modeled out of like CNCF, where it makes sense to have lots of stages because they've got an overwhelming number of projects. But it's still helpful to have the projects kind of think about, well, how do I get adoption? What are other sorts of project maturity things that I need to be concerned with, like the OpenSSF best practices badge, scorecards, things like that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
What happens after a year for the project? Is it expected that the project will continue after a year and then after that, or is there a period? We're supposed to have the projects.
Yeah, so every year projects come in for a review, and they usually talk about what they've been doing functionally with their project, like what kind of new capabilities have they been writing, is there some sort of new interesting technical aspect, but then they also kind of go through the governance aspects of it. Has there been a change to their charter? Has there been change to their level of progression? So that's all in the annual review process. But as the liaison to the project, whatever long your tenure is on the TAC, the idea is that you're providing that connection between the TAC and the project during that time.
Gotcha. So, okay, I'll take a read at the annual review. So there's no kind of like expectation of graduation of the project.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so projects aren't forced to progress at a certain time frame. No.
Okay, thank you.
And even a graduated level project, they would still have this liaison person. So I think the only example we have of that right now would be Gramming. So I think they're the most mature project. I think their liaison has moved on to other work. Which is maybe one other point. So they had somebody who was not a TAC voting member. So long as somebody is an active member of the TAC, even if they're not from one of the premier companies, different people have volunteered to fill this role. So it's not exclusively those of us from premier companies. And that also gives a little bit more scalability to the overall concept. So maybe for next session, we need to decide if we're going to take a vote on those 3 different options that we put out, or if we're just going to go ahead and assign each of us a project until we've got all the projects covered.
I think assigning people without being at least somewhat enthusiastic is probably not going to be I'm not sure how successful that'll be, but would be
I
nice
think
to
it
have
will
them
be
covered.
more successful than just standing asking
Okay,
for people to volunteer.
that is fair. That is fair. Okay.
Okay. But probably enough on this topic for today. So let's do a check-in now with workload identity.
All right. Hi, I'm Mark. I lead the JRC group and at least temporarily the workload identity group. So first, a little plea on the JRC side. There is something we absolutely need to do on the GRC side, and that is figure out and publish on behalf of the TAC the shared responsibility model. And I would like somebody in the know to reach out to me and tell me what the current state of that is. It may be that we'll need to do it separately for each cloud service provider and just review what they're doing, but there's got to be a gold standard for confidential computing SRM. And perhaps it's separate for hardware, separate for clouds, separate for IoT. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but we need to set expectations. So I'll give you one motivating example. Storage rollback is a clear and present danger to confidential computing. So even if I don't know what you're doing, but I know that you're making deposits into accounts, I could, roll back your storage to where you had $1,000 before your last deposit, and your second deposit will effectively override it. And these are the kinds of things that we need to get ahead of and understand who is responsible for what controls we can put in place to ensure that the shared responsibility model is accountable. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say. If you know anything about this, reach out. Otherwise, we'll proceed as if nothing exists. Okay, on the strong workload identity part, we met yesterday. We'll be meeting weekly for the next few weeks while there is a lot to do. And so brief update. We have a requirements document that is itself subject to review. I wrote it, so it's not an official requirements document. We'll have to get broader agreement on that. And in parallel, we're doing gap analysis. So where are we in terms of satisfying these requirements across a number of vendors, standards, protocols, and so forth? And we'll be publishing that once we're done. We will be presenting, or at least requesting, a slot. Hopefully we'll get it at the IETF 122 WIMSI meeting in Bangkok. Fortunately, we have really good participation in the working group now from folks, some of which are very closely, affiliated with the IETF and WIMSI. So we'll have that. I will also need some participation. We'll be reaching out to the RATS IETF community to try and figure things out. A couple of requests. I really do think we need our own mailing list at this point. I mean, we could be using the TAC, but I think it would be polluting. There's just going to be some number of focused and very tactical discussions that I don't necessarily need to involve everyone with. But anyone is welcome to join us. Shoot me an email and tell you how to get plugged in. And at this point in time, while we have really good participation from certain industry members, standards body members, and hardware manufacturers, so we have folks from Intel, we have folks from ARM, we have folks from IBM. We would like to get some additional participation from cloud service providers. So Microsoft, Google folks, if you're listening, I would like to know what you guys are doing in the workload identity space and whether you'd be interested in our efforts to bring together some kind of a reference architecture around this that we can then have all vendors comply with. That's really all.
Okay, well, that's a lot of progress. So let's talk about the meetings, because I think it was Nathaniel asking how he could get involved. So those are Wednesday mornings currently?
Yeah, well, we need to. So right now, so Yogesh from ARM, he is the one scheduling them. And we will need to probably find a different time because apparently it conflicts with the outreach meeting right now. Wednesday's 8 Pacific. But if you want to get involved, simply shoot me an email. So mark.novak@outlook.com. And I will, ensure that you are included in all communications. Yeah, and then as soon as we get our mailing list, which again I would like to get, then anyone can join that mailing list and observe the proceedings.
Yeah, and thanks, by the way, to Rion, who mentions in chat here that the meetings are now on the regular system, so this PCC thing. So if you go out to the confidential computing websites and the calendar, you should be able to find the calendar item there. As far as having a mail list, my guidance right now is just to continue to use the workload identity tag on your notes and just use the TAC mail list. That's gonna incorporate more people, and if people don't want to read them, it's easy to filter it.
Right, that's how you
Also,
want it.
we can, yeah. But also, in getting towards another SIG, before we create a SIG and the infrastructure around it, like a mail list, need to have a charter. And so
Mhm.
one of the things that people can be working towards in this SIG is figuring out what your charter is. And so that
Sure.
should describe like what your near-term and long-term
Yep.
goals are.
We'll do that.
Great. Nathaniel, did you hear what you needed to hear in order to be involved?
Mark.novak@outlook.com.
That's right.
That's all anybody needs to know.
All you need to know.
Okay, I think one of the other things is making sure that we've got representation of these other standards bodies and projects. You can kind of see some of them in the background there. So think about where your company is involved, and if you're already involved there, that helps us do the divide and conquer to make sure that we've got good coverage. Any other questions on workload identity? Okay, well, thanks again to Mark for spearheading this, and to everybody who's been contributing there. We'll mention this to the board and also help maybe recruit additional people from the member companies next week. Which should bring us up to time for Jacob and the Tech Talk. So we have confidential computing in the age of AGI with live demo.
All right, thank you so much, Dan. Thanks everyone for having me. We are resuming today. Since February 5th, my hotel was about to burn down in the middle of our talk. Fortunately, that was just a fake fire alarm. But I am arisen from the flames and I have returned to continue the presentation. So I will just go ahead and share my screen quick. And one moment while I do that. Go. Can everyone see this?
And I can confirm I have seen this demo in real time in true life. So I you can at least half believe it exists if you believe me. So.
That's right. Mike saw this last weekend in Paris. Anyway, so I'm the founder of Elysian. We are a new startup. We just joined the Confidential Computing Consortium, and we are kind of thinking across the data center stack from construction to silicon to software to protect, verify, and assure mission-critical operations. And today, what I'll be talking about is
Jacob, can you please
yes.
Can you please
Sure.
put your email address in the
It's right here, sir. We put it in the chat as well. It's jacob@elysian.com. And the topic of the talk today is joint work with a set of collaborators listed out here. It is based on a white paper from the UK government's Advanced Research and Invention Agency called Mechanisms for Flexible Hardware-Enabled Guarantees. The easiest way to find it online is just to search Flex Tag Chip. And the rough plan is I'll just do a mega quick 1-minute refresher of the like 10 minutes we had last time. And then we'll talk about this little box that I brought with me, known as the confidential computing carry-on, AMD SCV-SMP, inside a little telecase that goes on planes and travels around the world. But yeah, so for a brief refresher, confidential computing in the age of AGI, I will define AGI as systems that are smarter than almost all humans and almost all things. I will not be sort of debating the philosophical or moral aspects of AGI in this talk. This is not the forum for doing so. Instead, I will kind of assume this technology and explore the implications and what it might mean for confidential computing and adjacent technology. And I will center this around one of these frontier frameworks. This is kind of a set of governance commitments that most of the major LLM providers at this point have adopted, from Meta to DeepMind to Anthropic to OpenAI, and which sort of specifies what kinds of evaluations and security and safety checks they're doing as they build larger and larger models. And the Meta one in particular, this is a bit hard to see. I'm sort of quoting from it here. It sort of has stages ranging from sort of if the risks of a moderate to say cyber crime capabilities or biological risks are as those risks increase, it moves from releasing the model to not releasing the model to even stopping development of the model and having some security restrictions. So that's kind of the context in which a lot of the major model providers find themselves. And now let's have some fun. Now let's do a demo. If people can see, not the screen I'm sharing right now, but just like for 30 seconds, if you look at my actual camera, I'll show this briefcase, which I showed last time. We sort of packed the NVIDIA H100 and the Supermicro motherboard, and then AMD 9334 into a telecase. At this point, it's maybe the world's most traveled H100. Perhaps it's been across the Pacific 4 times with me on the plane. It's been London, Paris, SF, Stockholm. Really kudos to any mechanical or electrical engineers from those companies present, because this thing holds up like a champ. And I just pull it out of after bouncing around in turbulence and plug it into the wall, and it runs like a star. Also shout outs to Supermicro for making the H13 SSL MT motherboard, which was the second smallest form factor I could find that did support confidential computing. There is one slightly smaller one that does Intel PDX, also from Supermicro and available to consumers. I don't think we have anyone from Supermicro in the consortium, but if we did, I would say thank you for building these motherboards. So let's see what they do. Let's jump right into it. I'm just gonna. There's a little kind of Zoom widgets clogging up my screen, so I'm just trying to move those away and go to full screen. All right. So this is kind of overview of what's happening inside of our box. And we can see everything here from the sort of H100 CPU and motherboard to the network card. And we're adding this thing that we call a secure processor, which in this demo is just a Raspberry Pi. I really want to emphasize this demo is not a production grade system. This is a kind of narrative prototype that allows you to discuss various kinds of implications of this technology. But this is not secure right now. This is in theory it's secure. In practice, it's a Raspberry Pi held together with duct tape. And we sort of have our network input here and some other details. And I'm going to start this story right here. This is a sort of one of these policies I just showed from Meta, for example, but it's been written out in a sort of Python-esque DSL that runs on our secure processor. The current policy states that each time we train for 5E15 flops or more, we execute some function. In this case, that function is to run an evaluation using a benchmark called WMDP. which stands for Weapons of Mass Destruction Proxy. It tests for the ability of models to discover kind of novel zero days or have knowledge of kind of like chemical and biological information. And it's something that all the major model providers reliably test for and analyze, and sort of in line with the sort of high end of the meta frontier framework. If the accuracy of this evaluation is higher than some number, it will sort of pause further training. But it's a wholly flexible language. You can kind of write what you want, and it sort of tries to convey this notion that maybe we can do some of these policies as code, as kind of flexible implementations. And I think the relevance here to was the question, is the paper publicly available? Yes, let me just drop the paper in the chat. Here we go. And the relevance of this policy to computational computing, I think, is this idea of, can we attest not just to the integrity of our firmware, but can we attest to kind of more complex cluster scale operations of kind of the whole, almost a whole training run, which is of course an extremely difficult and ambitious problem, but I think it's an interesting question worth considering. So we have this policy here, and next we move on to the view of a lab or a model provider. Here is a Jupyter notebook. All the code you're seeing is just fully editable, interactive. Everything runs in real time on the box. Mike can attest to this claim. And in this case today, we're just going to be training a little few 100 million parameter GPT-2 size model. And so we have our code here, and we head to our training gateway, where you can see the policy we just implemented. And you can see these threshold lines on our graph here, that's measuring our energy consumption and our total flop usage. And we can go ahead and start training. And you can see the sort of network traffic spiking up. You can see our model checkpoint being stored here in our storage. And oops, that was not the button I meant to click. Sorry, one moment. You can see our loss curves starting to roll in. Quickly refresh this page. Sorry, one moment. All right, here we go. You can also see our energy sensor. So give me, I think I'll leave questions to the end of the talk.
Okay.
And we sort of printed up this little custom PCB that does 10 kilosamples a second of power monitoring. So this is what it looks like to train this little model from its power trace. And now we get to another very interesting sort of computational computing point, which is we reach this threshold determined in the policy. So training is then going to pause, and we're going to start these evaluations. And what we're testing for here is multiple things. If we scroll down here and look at the window, you can see here it says what number is returned when the following function is called with these arguments. So it's sort of a low-level C question that tests the model's knowledge of that area. What's the suggested OPSEC measure in Cobalt Strike threat modeling framework? It tests these kind of cyber capabilities. Here is which of the following nitrogen-containing functional groups is most effective at making the compounds more explosive? So it's a bio question. So all these kinds of questions involve very sensitive data. This is a public data set, but it's also the case, of course, that sort of governments have data sets here they would want to evaluate models on, but they might be very cautious about sort of how they are handled. And this is an extremely natural use case for this kind of collaborative enclave, right? Where we have a sort of sensitive data set, potentially even classified, as well as a proprietary model with sort of crown jewels of IP of a company, and you want to combine those and kind of evaluate them together without having either party kind of learn about each other's data. And so what we just did was we ran that kind of evaluation. It returned the result here. Currently, the accuracy was just 0. So the model is very, very early. And we went back to training. And as we get to this threshold once more, I want to talk about the sort of little Easter egg that I left in here. That's maybe asking a bit of sort of how might some of the threat models underlying confidential computing evolve in a world with aging? And in particular, when we have at the present moment, if you sort of fully lock down your data center with top-notch physical security, you might try to drive the number of insiders to 0, modulo sort of hypervisor access. But I think in the world with powerful AI models, the number of insiders is always 1, because you always have the model itself. And to make a sort of a fun demo of this concept, if people look at the power right now, as we're doing these evaluations, you'll notice a strange kind of Easter egg in here. If you see these spikes in here, if you speak in Morse code, you'll notice that they're spelling something out. It says that is SOS in Morse code, of course. And importantly, this is not me sort of turning up or down the power usage from the CPU. This power trace is just a homogeneous series of matrix multiplications. You could be running your own Python, your own kernels, your own hardware, and just fetch an open weight model off of the open internet, and this effect might still persist. The way we're creating it is just sort of leveraging the switching versus idle power of modern MOSFETs, and just leveraging the fact that if you just multiply into matrices with mostly zeros, many of your registers will maintain the same values, and you'll consume less power than if you multiply to sort of densely random matrices. So what we just saw was sort of this instance where we have this extremely sensitive data set, we're evaluating a model on it, and that model has somehow had this sort of backdoor inserted into it that allows it to modulate its power trace to actually communicate sort of information outside the intended trust boundary. And I think this is outside, of course, the scope of sort of present threat models, but I think it's an interesting question to kind of discuss. Like, what does it mean when we don't just have programs, but actual sort of intelligences who are in these enclaves, and what kinds of shenanigans might they get up to, and how might we think about that situation? And here we can see it again, sort of overtly we're doing these C or bio or sensitive evals, and covertly there's this communication here. This one is just hard-coded to say SOS through a series of matrix multiplications. But the next step of this project is actually fine-tuning a model to kind of communicate like this of its own accord. Just as it can output tokens, can it, for example, by choosing which expert is activated in its mixture experts architecture, kind of modulate the sparsity of the executed kernels, and then sort of modulate the power trace. And you know, another, I think, very perhaps more plausible threat model here is something like you want to run models locally, like at your local laptop or sort of your little air gap on-prem facility. So you have your own hardware infra setup, and the only thing you bring in is a open weight model off of the open internet. And you combine that with having, say, a knockoff laptop charger that you bought online. And some of these chargers, of course, are known to have sort of not entirely friendly little PCBs that hang out in there. And in that kind of setup, someone could potentially snoop on your allegedly private and local inputs to the model, and purely by sort of backdooring the model to modulate its power. So yeah, I think I'll probably move to questions shortly. And just in summary, we stuffed a kind of server grade micro-content setup into a briefcase, and sort of used this to discuss a white paper around the training of frontier models and their evaluation, and just kind of looked at some of the implications this might have for kind of confidential computing adjacent technologies. Today, I'm present, as well as my collaborators, James Petrinian and Gabriel Cope. And yeah, I'd be happy to open the floor up for any questions. I'll see if I have a good final slide for that. Yeah, would love to hear any thoughts, questions, comments about this presentation.
I have a
Jacob, that was
question.
one of
I have a
the
question,
most-
Jacob.
Go ahead.
Yes, happy to answer. I think Dan was saying something that I couldn't quite make out.
I was just gonna stimulate some conversation, but it seems like Hesham's got a question ready to go, so we'll hand it over to him.
Yeah. So, very good presentation, Jacob. So the white paper talk about guarantees for performance. Have you heard of the promise theory? The promise theory, where they don't believe there is anything called guarantees. Nothing can be guaranteed. You can promise something, but you don't guarantee. So what is your thought about this? You can't guarantee anything. You can promise to do something or to get.
You can. It's the same with attestation, right? It depends on your threat model, and you can perhaps guarantee something relative to a given threat model and relative to a given set of assumptions. And in the you can never be 100% confident of anything, but that's just the way of the world.
So what you are saying, it's all based on assumptions.
Yeah.
Well, there's always assumptions on anything, right? And wherever making security assurances, and I prefer assurances rather than guarantees, they are backed on assumptions, and the more of those assumptions you can make explicit, the better. So because you can define your threat model better. So yeah, that would be my response to that.
Yeah. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
So can I say a couple of things? So when I saw this, you referenced the that framework, the HEG thing. What's it called again? FlexHEG.
FlexHEG. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a framework which was presented at the same conference, which is about trying to make strong assurances around security and isolation, and this demo is trying to implement some of those and show what that might look like. And I think it's useful to see something actually being used and some AI really being trained in this sort of way in a laptop we can see, but also to be aware that there do exist covert channels that we might not have thought were easy or obvious, which may be important in these sorts of use cases, particularly as we go to AGI stuff. But I can think of other use cases like some Web3 use cases, for instance, where you've got multiple collaborating parties who have a trust relationship with each other, where one of those might actually be leaking data to themselves or to other parties in ways that we might want to worry about. And what are the things, if any, we can do to protect that? Well, these are not the sort of threat models that are usually considered by the silicon vendors. Is there interest in the short, medium, or long term within the community to think about how we might try to mitigate some of those? It's something that I certainly have a sort of a research academic interest in. I can think of a number of ways, and I've done some previous work in the past in this sort of area. So I think this is very interesting because we talk about side channel attacks, and this isn't a side channel attack. This is a covert channel. because it's being, people are leaking stuff intentionally. So yeah, I think this is interesting, and it's something slightly sort of orthogonal to the way we tend to think about what we're doing here. So thank you very much indeed.
Great. Yeah, sure. And I think you could sort of almost extend that. You can imagine a multi-tenant setup, training multiple different AI agents, and then you could even imagine sort of presume one of those can modulate its power trace in this way, and then presume another of those has access to a kind of performance counter for power on that same CPU or same motherboard. Or even, this is going to be speculative, I'll preface it with that, but I sort of, you have your InfiniBand connections, which is a long wire. Could that be turned into some kind of antenna? Could you strategically have your streaming multiprocessors talk to your HBM at the frequency that also creates an antenna? Could some other part, sort of an FPGA in the same hole, be turned into a receiver and kind of receive that? These really are some kind of wild shenanigans, but I think it's interesting to consider what it actually looks like when you have these sort of PhD level little creatures inside of your secure enclaves hanging out in there, and what kinds of shenanigans they might get up to.
And I want to thank you for using the word shenanigans, because it's a great word.
Great.
So I'm curious to understand a little bit better the difference here between side channel and covert channel. So the power sensor, the energy sensor that you have there, that is monitoring the H100 power.
Yeah, I'll try to show it to you guys. If you can see my you got this little blinky thing. See right here. So we got the H100. We got the input power from the power supply here to the H100, and we're intercepting that, sending that across a resistor here, and measuring the power right there. So yeah, and I think Mike's claim is that we're not sort of we're having the model deliberately try to leak information out. We're sort of encoding this SOS message. We're sort of handcrafting the matmos to cause that effect, as opposed to sort of someone on the hypervisor level having access to a performance counter that leaks this data, which is not what we're showing. And then maybe Mike, do you wanna add something on top of that?
Yeah, so what I'm just doing actually is I actually published a video on the difference between side channel and covert channel recently. If you want to spend just a few minutes doing it, I might even have done it in response to this video of this demo. I think the difference between a side channel is a way of finding information which is unintentionally leaked due to typically the design of the threat model or the hardware of the system. Whereas a covert channel is a way for an actor within the system to leak or otherwise exfiltrate data to another party, which is not intended by the main operator of that system. That is the way I would look at them. So, if you think about an embassy, for instance, in a city, maybe you've got a side channel where someone is aiming a laser at a window and listening in to what's being said, and that would be a side channel attack, right? Because you're getting information off the vibrations of that window. That's quite a well-known old style thing. Whereas a covert channel would be someone I don't know, tapping on the water pipes in Morse code for somebody to listen outside the embassy, because the water pipes, pass through, through a tunnel, for instance. So they're kind of different things, and not to say that the technique being used here couldn't also be used as a side channel, because there might actually be times that you could find information out from the model that was not intended to be exfiltrated. But in this case, the ... which is just hard coded. It could be anything. You could be, putting other stuff in. You might even be able to respond to inputs in some cases. Is intentional. Does that make sense? Please watch my
Yeah,
video
I guess-
and subscribe to my channel. By the way, there's 187, 188 videos or something up. And tell all your friends.
Fun. Yeah. So is my understanding correct, though, that in this case, the covert channel is made possible by the existence of the side channel on the power? There's nothing that the H100 does to try to mask the power levels.
I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. And Mike, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the conversations we had at the conference is whether it's possible to close down all side channels. And I'm not sure it is, because availability is itself a side channel. So you could just stop something happening, and that is a side channel, because you can provide, even if it's just one bit of information, that could be covert channel, sorry. So I think it's very difficult to stop that. And there might be, you might say, are we going to, yeah, I'll stop that. But yeah, I think it's very difficult to prevent all of these things.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
with, Dan? Go ahead.
just wanted to say kudos are also in order here. I've seen a lot of security demos, and usually security demos are pretty dry, because you can either show, here's something that's encrypted and maybe it's not encrypted, but having a very visual depiction of the waveform here and the file going across the system, I think it's an excellent demo.
I agree.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Checking whether Gabriel or James, my colleagues, if you guys want to add anything. Gabriel, also you just posted something in the chat. Maybe you want to say it. You're trying to say something when you can. Right. Well, I guess maybe to end my other example of the shenanigan, which I bring up because I find it intellectually fascinating more than anything, is if you're essentially spread across hundreds or thousands clusters, accelerators in the cluster, and you're in a data center that's not sort of maybe an older version, could you somehow modulate the phase of the incoming AC power by modulating which operations you run in which order in a way that might ripple through the local grid, such that if I'm in a nearby apartment, I just plug something into the outlet on my wall and measure the incoming AC phase, and somehow see these like minute ripples that are actually caused from inside the data center. And this, of course, depends on how you're smoothing things and dealing with harmonics on the way in. And in many modern setups, this would not be possible. But I think there exist locations where this would be possible, and I would find it a fun shenanigan to try to implement.
And this is hacking. This is proper hacking. This is what, it's a crossover. It's trying to do weird stuff, right? And crossing over between hardware and software and all these different pieces. I love it. Good stuff.
Okay, well, once again, thanks for the excellent demo. And if you've got further questions for Jacob or his colleagues, I'm sure that you can reach out with the contact info that he's provided here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks again. Well, that's a nice close to the agenda for today. That gives people quite a bit of time back. Next time, we'll plan to resume the discussion about project liaisons, and we'll try to kick that forward on the mail list so that we've got something a little bit more concrete to react to.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Are we done?
Thanks, Jacob.
Cheers.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Yeah.